All right, let's get right into it. We usually think of debt as just a burden, something to get rid of. But what if it's way more than that? What if it's the actual blueprint for our modern world? Seriously, think about it. Every major event, every crisis, every boom, it's all built on this invisible architecture of IOUs. Today, we're going to unravel a paradox that sits at the very heart of the global economy.
Just stop and consider this for a second. The United States, Japan, China, Germany, the entire EU, every single major economy is drowning in debt. It just doesn't seem to make sense, right? If literally everyone owes a massive amount of money, well, that leads to a very simple but very profound question. And look, we're not talking about a little bit of credit card debt here. The total global debt has blown past $315 trillion. To put that in perspective, that's almost 3 times the size of the entire world economy. It's a number so huge it's almost meaningless. And get this, it's growing by $1 trillion every 100 days.
So, if the whole world is in the red, who exactly is in the black? Who does the world owe all this money to? The answer, as you're about to see, is both way simpler and a lot more unsettling than you probably think. Okay, to really wrap our heads around this, let's start with the biggest player on the board, the United States. Its debt isn't just America's problem, it's a global issue. By following the money here, we can start to see how this whole thing is put together.
So, the U.S. national debt is now sitting at over $38 trillion. That is the highest it has ever been in history. It's a number you hear thrown around all the time on the news. But the real story, the interesting part, is finding out who actually owns it.
Now this is where it gets really interesting, because this chart just completely flips a common misconception on its head. A full 2/3 of U.S. debt is held by Americans. Yep, it's in our own bank accounts, our retirement funds, our insurance policies, and even held by the Federal Reserve itself. Only about 1/3 is held by other countries.
And when we zoom in on those foreign holders, the picture gets even clearer. Japan is actually the biggest foreign holder of U.S. debt. And China? Well, their $800 billion sounds like a lot, but it's only about 2% of the total U.S. debt. So that whole idea that America is somehow beholden to China, well, it's pretty much a myth.
So here's the first big reveal. America's biggest creditor is America itself. The government issues bonds, and American funds and people buy them. The government then pays interest on those bonds using tax dollars, and that interest money flows right back into American retirement accounts and investment funds. It's a giant, self-contained circular system. The country is literally paying itself.
Okay, so let's zoom out from the U.S. and look at the whole planet. That circular logic we just saw isn't some weird American thing. Nope, it's the basic model for the entire global financial system. Everybody is playing the same game, just with different jerseys. And this quote just nails it. It's like a huge game of pass the parcel. Japan lends to the U.S. lends to Europe. Europe lends to developing countries. And then, those countries lend right back to the West by buying their bonds. Everyone is holding everyone else's IOU, all secured by another promise, in a game that only works if nobody tries to cash out all at once.
So who are the real referees in this game? Well, surprise, it's not really the governments. It's the markets themselves. These huge institutions, hedge funds managing billions, pension funds for millions of people, central banks, they are the ones who truly decide who gets credit. They decide which countries can borrow easily and which ones are going to get squeezed.
And the ultimate market maker, the biggest player of all, is the central bank. You see, when the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank creates money, what it's really doing is buying government debt. This means there's literally no such thing as debt-free money. Every single dollar in your pocket is just a representation of a debt held somewhere else in the system. And this brings us to the most counterintuitive, most mind-bending secret of this whole system. You ready for this? This enormous, ever-growing pile of national debt, it was never ever designed to be paid back. Not now, not ever.
So how is that even possible? Well, it's all thanks to a simple mechanism called refinancing. When an old government bond is due to be paid, the government doesn't scramble to find tax money to pay it off. Nah, it just issues a brand new bond and uses that money to pay for the old one. The main debt, the principal, is just rolled over, basically forever.
And this right here is the fundamental difference between government debt and your debt. You have to pay back your mortgage. The goal is to be debt-free. But for a government, the goal isn't to be debt-free. The goal is just to stay credible enough to keep rolling over the debt. For you, debt is a liability. For the global financial system, government debt is actually a permanent and essential asset.
So the whole system isn't running on the actual promise of repayment. It's running on pure confidence. As long as investors believe a country can afford to pay the interest on its debt, they'll keep buying new bonds to pay off the old ones. The game just keeps on going.
And here's the craziest part of the paradox. If a major country like the United States actually did manage to pay off its entire debt, the whole system would collapse. Government bonds are considered the safest financial asset on earth. Pension funds, banks, even other countries, they all rely on them. Wiping them out would be like pulling the foundation out from under the entire global economy.
But this system, this incredible machine built on perpetual debt and confidence, it has a hidden cost. It works perfectly, right up until the moment it doesn't. So what happens when that trust, that core belief, starts to crack?
Well, we've seen exactly what happens. In Greece, it led to years of painful budget cuts, austerity, forced on them by their creditors. In Argentina, it's led to a cycle of repeated defaults that have crippled the country for decades. And in Sri Lanka, it led to a total economic collapse, with people unable to get fuel or food. When the confidence goes, the abstract numbers turn into very real human suffering.
And there's another cost, one that's working away even when the system seems fine. All the interest on this government debt. Who pays it? Taxpayers do. And where does that money go? Well, it flows upward to the big institutions and wealthy investors who own all the bonds. This is a huge reason why rising global debt and rising global inequality often move in perfect lockstep. So in the end, that clear line we imagine between who's a debtor and who's a creditor is just completely gone. It's a blur. Governments issue the debt, banks then multiply it, investors trade it, and all of us citizens, through our pensions and our taxes, are completely tied up on both sides of the equation. We are all part of this engine.
Which brings us right back to the central question. This entire $315 trillion global economy is built on a series of promises that just keep getting rolled over. But if there's one thing history teaches us, it's that not all promises can be kept forever. So the question we're left with isn't if the system will be tested, but when and what happens next.